Hi, I'm Anna.
I'm Ben.
We're AutoSave. Welcome to our channel.
Today we're watching Frieren, Beyond Journey's End, Season 1, Episode 11. Last episode was, I think, my favorite episode of the series, but that's kind of hard to say out loud, even right now, because I have so many favorite episodes. Every episode I'm in love with. I got to edit and then rewatch our reaction from last episode.
For funsies.
God, this show feels to me like the first time before we started autosave, when I was watching Jujutsu Kaisen for the first time, I like rewatched it a second time and a third time, and then watched reactions to the first season of Jujutsu Kaisen. You know, like I was so head over heels in love, and that's exactly how I feel with this series. I imagine that once I'm done season 1, I'm going to rewatch it a few times.
Maybe even see who else watched it.
Yeah. God, Aura, kill yourself.
Such a good line. So cold.
So many good lines. From Flame, I've been calling her Flame,
yeah,
but
we're gonna call her Sensei.
yeah, from now on,
forward.
yeah. I'll probably still try
Just
to
so we
mispronounce
don't
her name. Who knows?
mispronounce.
Yeah. I imagine we're gonna be going forward with some sort of a clean slate. Like maybe we'll get a conversation with Granite, or just like
Probably
the
type
town.
Of closure
but
there.
I think that the demons we have been fighting, are going to be behind us.
I hope that we learn if
These
we're gonna get
ones, at least.
I hope if we get a little bit of closure here, I hope that there is some learning more about this barrier that has been put here, and what's the upkeep for that. I'm really intrigued by that.
I wonder if it has anything to do with like just the idea of like misperception of mana, and like being able to like fool people. Like what
honestly, it was created by Sensei, so you would think that there could be an element of it that would be her knowledge of how demons view magic and mana,
and what that is to them.
A trick of a kind.
Yeah.
And that's how we wondered, oh, well, if there's a barrier keeping them out, then how did the peace envoys get in?
Yeah.
What if it's a trick?
Maybe.
Tell them to spin around 3 times and then they can enter.
Yeah. Why kill all the elves? And are we going to fight another Sage of Destruction at some point? Those are my 2 big questions going into this episode.
Good questions.
Also, we were building log cabins in a flashback. I wonder if, like, Frieren's out there carving logs in order to get them to fit, nicely into each other, or if there's a specific spell for that. I don't know. Okay. All right. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Sweet. Whew.
Frieren-sama. 遅かったね。アウラを倒したんですね。
It's like they can finally rest. Imagine what it was like fighting them as they were like... Because they fight even as they've turned to dust, so that means there was a middle period of decay.
And you wonder if, like...
Army of the undead.
Even after their bodies are long gone and it's just their armor, if their soul is somewhat attached to it. God, can you imagine getting to Beyond Journey's End, getting there to see Himmel, and then this army of soldiers comes up to thank you for, like, freeing them?
We'll take Graf Granite with us. He can see his son.
Damn. See, those characters, I don't know. And she looks like elfish, Graf's here.
So Graf is like a title, not his name.
感謝する。北側諸国の英傑たちによく敬意を払ってくれた。
前はもっと派手にやっていたんだけどね。ヒンメルに怒られたから。ヒンメル様はフリーレン様のしつけを
trained you well.
しつけっていう。でもまあ、そうだよね。これが普通のリアクションだ。どういうことですか？よくリュグナーたちを倒した。偉いぞ。
Oh, I love the framing there.
He's up close and personal.
The score is amazing right now. It really does give, like,
Has he found
memoriam.
His son?
I have chills.
I know.
Oh.
Oh, and then a cat. Blessings everywhere. Oh, nice.
Good transition. Great.
Yes.
Think it's real?
口伝により継承されたこの町の防護結界魔法とは似ても似つかない。
Oral tradition.
それより堅苦しい言葉遣いはなしにしよう。お前から見ればわしなど赤子のようなものだろう。
そういえばハイター様が言っていましたね。オードでは貴族に対する比例は死罪だとか。ヒンメルとアイゼンが王様にタメ口叩いて処刑されかけたんだよ。懐かしいな。ヒンメルの泣き叫ぶ顔。死罪だなんて大げさな。
それとなクソガキ。わしにタメ口叩くのはこの町では十分。
Oh, nice.
なおさん、この高そうな椅子ぶっ壊す。中央諸国はやばいですね。
So unique.
裏庭の木切り終えました。
Oh, so good.
タメ口程度で牢に放り込むような法はこの町にはない。
よかったですね、シュタレク様。
He's dead.
What a cool shot.
What happens to the upkeep of the barrier if Graf was killed? If it's an oral tradition?
Yeah. Jeez, what are those? It's interesting that, like, there was no interest in asking what the oral tradition was, you know?
Mm-hmm. She's still reading it. Oh, new clothes.
Oh, it's a winter outfit.
Stop.
Oh my god. This song's amazing. Whew. I have chills again, dude.
Oof.
フリーレン、お前は魔王城のある大陸最北端のエンデを目指しているそうだが、今は北部高原の情勢がだいぶ悪いようでな。冒険者の場合でも一級魔法使いの同行が必要だそう。
ならフリーレン様がいるので問題ありませんね。何その一級魔法使いって。フリーレン様。
Is it like a new grading system?
She does not. She probably does not have a certification.
Oh.
Third.
Okay.
闇医者みたいに言わないでよ。どうせこの正常の証ももう使わないんでしょ。何ですかその骨董品は。
少なくとも半世紀以上前からあるぜ。
全然最近じゃん。困るんだよね。頻繁に管理の基準を変えられちゃう。
So frequently.
ともかくこのままでは先に進めません。確か北側諸国でも一級試験が受けられる場所がありましたよね。
北側諸国最大
The largest magical city in the Northernlands. Allburst?
フリーレン、グラナト家はこの恩を決して忘れん。良い旅を。
Oh, snowfall.
そろそろ冬ですね。ここら辺の冬は厳しいから気をつけてね。
It's good they got those new clothes.
So cool.
魔王軍との戦いで最も多くの人を殺したのは
Wow.
北側諸国の冬
The
だよ。
winters
Whew.
of the northern lands. Transition to the past?
迷った。
No.
No. It's just that wintry.
迷った。シュタレク様、起きてください。
Just carry him like
寝たら死に
before.
ますよ。
ジャンボベリースペシャルってこんなに小さかったっけ？
この強風だと魔法で飛ばして運ぶわけにもいかないね。多分どっかに飛んでっちゃう。
Put a barrier over us.
I love the reasoning behind not being able to carry him with magic.
Yeah, totally. I bet Frieren built that.
Is anybody else here? Yes. Another elf? Close the door.
I know that voice actor. Who? Roswell ReZero?
Thought the elves have already died out.
He doesn't have a mage to go with him? As anyone would do.
Craft the monk. Is Stark okay?
He's just gonna wake up and be like...
The pacing is so fucking good.
Perfect timing to run into someone with supplies.
Do you know who I am?
And before that...
Gonna name drop Flame?
Of course Frieren would steal the covers.
Love Stark's training. Do you think Frieren's suspicious at all? Or is it just me being suspicious? Oh, never mind. I shouldn't have been suspicious.
I feel like she should be a little bit weirded out from running into an elf. There has to be something. Especially with the question of, have you heard of me?
I'd imagine that if you're an elf and you're still alive, you must be somewhat capable or you've been in hiding, you know? Jesus! Pious girl.
It's probably weird to find an elf that would be...
You're young. I need her to exist.
Everyone who knew of...
Why do they keep showing us that? Wow.
Someone to praise you.
代わりに私が褒めますよ。褒められるようなことなんて何もない。常に魔力を制限しているのに？それは血の滲むような努力の賜物に見えますが、それこそ人生をかけたような。気がついていたの？何年一緒に旅をしていると思っているんですか？
Demons couldn't recognize it.
それに高額のためにもなります。なんで？もしかしたら私の子供は魔法使いになるかもしれませんよ。
He's the one who taught Frieren to suppress it, you think?
He would have already started that for her so that Frieren would definitely take her.
なんで女神様に仕える連中は変なやつが多いんだろうね。遠慮しておくよ。もう別のやつに褒めてもらったから。そうか。いい友人を持ったな。フリーレン、大事にしろ。
Oh man.
いや、その人はもう今は天国にいるよ。
He's in heaven.
いずれ会えるな。フリーレン、今生の別れとは思わん。何百年後かにまたな。おっさんも元気でな。楽しかったぜ。ペンダント、ありがとうございました。
Okay, that was Frieren, Season 1, Episode 11. We're in different clothes. That happened. And so did this episode. This episode happened.
There was different clothes in this episode.
We should be in winter apparel.
Shoot. It's too warm in here for winter jackets.
That's true. Since you brought it up already, we have to acknowledge that that was like at least one of my favorite parts of the episode. And I think that it's not just as simple as a TV show or anime giving me their characters going into another climate so their clothing will adjust, and they're doing it in a great way where they're keeping the palettes intact. It's not just that. That's great. But it's the delivery of that information and how it was conveyed to us as an audience. Mm-hmm. I loved how subtle but aware it was, and how it was brought up in conversation naturally. I adored it. And it's just one of many things that I loved about this episode.
Yeah, definitely. Huge compliments to
Starks.
that. I mean,
oh my god.
We're so used to watching shows where characters do not change their outfit through basically the entirety of the show, other than maybe a rare special occasion episode as a dance or a beach day, something. And so when you do get a change of clothes, a lot of the times it is more for an event and it's a different perspective or look at the character. But I appreciate where it's not calling attention. Mm-hmm. You're not like, oh, wait, my character's in different clothes that I'm watching right now. No, they're just in the winter version of their clothes. It's very similar. It feels like they would have picked that out because it looks exactly like the summer version of their clothes. I absolutely
Starks is my favorite.
Starks definitely is like... Fern's looks exactly like something she would pick. Yeah. I love that Frieren's basically just like added with a scarf. Mm-hmm. But Starks is just
God,
so
you know what?
Cool.
Everything about Stark blows me away with how much I love him. Like they haven't even spent much time developing it, and I think that's part of the success. Like specifically Fern and Stark's dichotomy and relationship. Like here's the deal. It's very short and comedic, right? It's just like a sprinkle of it. They're not like overly diving in, making it this like deep, like, oh, this is the humor of the moment. It's very like subtle and shallow, but in a good way.
Yeah.
And the reason why that works so well is because of the relationship and how little we've had it screen time wise, but what effect it's had during that screen time wise. Mm-hmm. Like the dialogue between Fern and Stark, whether in a fight, whether talking about Frieren, or the interaction so far are with such character and personality that when Stark is unable to walk anymore in the snow and Fern's carrying him and is making like funny remarks, it's just so like lovable to me. I love their relationship, and I love Stark so much.
Another great example in this episode of how they portrayed, I believe, both like their dynamic, but also mainly Fern's personality in that dynamic, other than your great example of the fact that, like, yeah, Fern kind of keeps like, oh yeah, you do your shopping, I'm gonna go this way.
Yeah.
No, we're not having food together, which is an interaction we saw a few episodes ago, and then Fern ended up joining Stark. We get the snow, obviously, like you said, which was really great, but there was this shot at the beginning of the episode where it's Frieren sitting in the carriage, Fern's on one side, Stark's on the other. We are not super close together. There's like a foot apart on both ends.
Mm-hmm.
Frieren gets outside, like out of the carriage, and then turns back and looks at them. And then there's a close-up of Fern and a close-up of Stark. And there's distance there, but not a distance that's portraying like an actual real lack of care or like an actual distance emotionally between the characters. But there is that, like, there's a calmness almost that comes with it. Like, and then us to get Fern carrying him later in the snow.
Yeah.
There's this, like, yeah, we care about each other, but I'm not all, like, up in his face and hugging him, and we're not, like, buddy-buddy.
Yes. It's like, in other shows that I have seen, there should be a deeper relationship between two characters because of how much they interact and how much time I've spent with them, but there isn't. This is perfect in the amount of closeness in their relationship they're giving, but above all else, it feels like they're part of a party and aren't like just a student of Frieren.
There's this idea of them being individuals.
They're not just following a protagonist.
Right.
They have their own like life and personality and weight about them.
And you have to remember that all three of these characters have had very isolated time periods. Like, Fern was an orphan and then was raised alone in the woods by a very old priest with no peers around her to get to know until Frieren came around, which isn't even really a peer. And then Stark was an orphan too, raised in the woods by Eisen, and then went off to and was living, you know, in this village with the dragon, still very isolated and not getting too close to the villagers. And then Frieren, we know that she was also living in the woods until the original party of heroes found her. So all of these characters have already developed their own strength as individuals, their own comfortability with being alone in this world. They are not hanging on the other person for comfort or for help. I think that it really fit, and it didn't give you this feeling that they don't like each other, which when you think of, oh, how do I show that these characters don't necessarily like each other, you'd put distance between them on the screen to show the distance that's actually going on internally. But that's not what the distance was saying to me.
Yeah, I agree with you. God, there's so much I want to talk about. What I have pulled up right now is a conversation that happens way later in the episode, right? And it's a flashback conversation that we're having between Frieren and
Hater?
Hater, whatever. Sorry. The idea of them talking here and the subject of what they're talking about, I loved in the previous episode the conversation of Hater addressing what he thinks Frieren's mana output is like compared to his own. I love that. The idea that it's brought back in this manner.
Like, she has 30% of what I have.
Yeah.
Was basically what he said in that other episode.
The idea that it was brought back alone, that idea I love, but I'm gonna like definitely overstep in my assumption here. The way that it was brought back of him acknowledging that Frieren is doing this, as well as the knowledge of Fern's ability to almost be invisible, gives me the like implication and vibe that this is something that a mage should be doing, and he's getting that idea from Frieren, and I love 100%. That.
I mean, there's a lot of evidence that would go with that take, not only from evidence from this conversation.
Sounds like something useful to know in the future.
Right, and why would it be useful to know in the future? Because what if I had a child that was a mage? But then we know when he met Fern, Himmel had already died. He was facing that kind of thing that everyone faces in their life of the inevitability of death for himself. And he knew, raising this young child that was an orphan, surrounded by so much death, as an old man, that once he's gonna die, and he's going to be leaving her alone. She's still going to be at a very young age to be left alone, and she's gonna have no one else in the world. He already knows that he needs to trick Frieren into taking on Fern as a mage. He's just setting things up to make it so Fern is even better, like, to end up being an apprentice.
Yeah. God, the idea of bringing back the conversation too of, but from a different person, of Frieren not using flashier spells because Himmel got mad at her, and then Fern's like, Himmel trained you well.
Right. I know, I wrote that down. And she was like, no, I wouldn't say that. I guess you're right. Yeah.
God, what do you think a conversation between Himmel and Flam would be like?
I wonder if they're talking in heaven.
I would love to know.
They're like, that's our girl.
Yeah. Like, oh, that's so great. We had the defensive barrier, like, and the grimoire, obviously it being a fake. But what was most interesting there was that Graf Granite was saying that the city's barrier, the spell for it, was passed down through oral tradition.
Which, during the episode, I remember being like, well, shit, what if he had died during the Lugnar and the Peace Envoy interactions, and Stark hadn't cut him out of that chair and gotten him medical help from that priest? Like, if he had died, he already lost his son. We didn't get any idea or showing that there was anyone else that was in that family. He could have had a wife and some other kids, and we just weren't seeing them. But what if he was the last one, and it's an oral tradition and not actually in that grimoire? Like, a lot more intense.
Do you think Frieren knows it? If it's passed down through oral tradition and Flam was the one to put it into practice, I'd imagine.
I remember that flashback to walking with her, and there was that little plant and the snow, and she put a barrier around it to protect it. I would think, and I believe they used that when they were talking about the barrier around this city originally. I'd be very surprised if Frieren didn't actually know the spell or what the oral tradition was, because she never went into this thinking that grimoire was real.
Yeah.
She automatically thinks every grimoire that is apparently her sensei's words is fake. It's just her hobby to collect them. So she didn't go into this wanting it to actually be the upkeep of the barrier and the barrier spell, which means she could already know it.
There's a couple more things I want to talk about before leaving, before leaving the area that we did to go into the northern lands.
Okay. Before winter.
But I want to talk about just the idea of time with Frieren, as the show. It's, if I had to give a compliment to one of the story beats, and I could only give one, I think it would be how they handle time. And I'd umbrella that with time in show as well as time showing the audience. So breaking that down a bit, I absolutely adored how much time was spent with the soldiers who had been set free and passed, because it conveys so much importance and weight and emotion that they gave to us in previous episodes.
Time of the episode.
And they gave it, they said it, right? How all these things and what these meant, these people were controlled and lost their, their skin. And that's a very heavy thing. But I definitely think in a lesser show, that's the last you talk about it. You don't do what I think is necessary, like Frieren does, of completing that on the dismount. You're not forgetting about the weight there. And I adore that. And then in the same way of time, they're not, whether it's with Frieren's life herself and us knowing how long she's been alive and us seeing the previous party, to spending time in a city recovering, or obviously later in the episode, time in another place, they're not scared to skip a month, skip 6 months, and that is so fucking cool to me.
Especially when and I think that's already set up to be an okay thing to do in terms of your pacing. In a lot of stories, I get a little wary when there's jumps in time and weeks go by, and I'm kind of like, ooh, but what happened between these characters in the past week? Like, if it was like a school-centered anime, and it's like, say, let's go with romance, because that's what I see the most of, and then we haven't seen the episode is White Day or something, and then the next episode is a month later. I'm like, well, what other interactions have they had since White Day?
Yeah.
You know,
I don't
and
know
now
what
I'm
White Day is.
It's like a Valentine's Day.
Okay.
But I think they do both, like one for the boys to give chocolates and stuff to the girls, and then girls to give candies to the boys.
Interesting.
Things like that. But normally time skipping, I'm kind of like, oh, I'm missing out on content, you know, but there's something about it with this that it's utilized because it's an important concept to the story.
Mm-hmm.
Time passing is an important concept, and being okay with time passing is an important concept in this story. That idea of you might lose people along the way, enjoying life while you're living it, the passage of time, the enjoyment in the mundane or the silly, like Frieren's hobby of collecting weird spells.
The song "While the Time Was Passing" in that initial town was phenomenal as well. I think my last thing to talk about before getting into the snowy bit is like, this is like, I feel like anybody who would know me as a person would know that this is like one of my favorite things about this series and this episode. The idea that there are certifications and like you need to be certified to, one, travel in an area, two, just certifications exist.
So like even use magic openly in the public.
Yeah. And like, and three, Frieren's like interpretation of it. It was everything. Okay, baseline, I'm gonna love this show if there is certification that needs to be met. I'm going to really love this show if there is a rule put into place that people aren't allowed to travel in a specific region unless they're accompanied by a first-class mage. This is gonna be my favorite show ever if you're going to have a character respond to that being like, what the fuck is that? Oh, I've been around so long that there's always different iterations of this. Here's a fucking cool-looking necklace, a holy emblem. And then Fern's gonna be like, what are you, some uncertified underground mage? And then Friren's like,
you're making it sound like I'm a back alley doctor. And I was like, I know, that's exactly what it sounds like.
I love it. And Fern's a third-class mage? I would have, like...
What that does is, it's interesting because it gives us some type of hierarchy, some type of power scaling. Because we know that Fern was at first underestimated by Lugnar. We know that Lugnar did not give any chance to Fern because Fern was this human mage that he was paying attention to Frieren as the one to be wary of, the one that would actually be able to defeat him. And so we're getting this idea that a third-class mage is what is able to defeat Lugnar. An envoy. What?
I'm gonna look like an idiot here. I think you're wrong here. I think that the idea, like, okay, so my first interpretation of it was like, okay, show us what you got. I'm going to rate you a third-class mage, therefore power scaling, a third-class mage could beat Lugnar. That's not how I interpret it. I think that the only reason Fern is graded a third-class mage was because that was the only or class tester within that region.
Oh, that's fair. I mean, we do get that idea that there are certain cities that do certain exams.
Yeah.
So we're headed to a place that offers the first class exam. That's fair.
I think that Fern potentially could be a first class mage, but the highest class that she could test for was third in that region. So I wouldn't be comfortable saying any third-class mage could beat Lugnar.
Well, I don't think because not every third-class mage is going to do Zoltrak the same way that Frieren taught Fern to do.
You're right.
But you're right to bring that up. Who knows actually for sure? Obviously, we don't. I would say there's evidence that could go in either direction from them walking and Fern being like, well, thank goodness we have Frieren with us if we need a first class. You know, she'd be like, oh, we can do it, and I can take the test if that is what she's able to do. But I would say the emphasis seems to be more on Frieren taking the test when they get to where they're going.
Yeah.
Before leaving this area and before going into the winter, would also like to bring up, in terms of the pacing, we kind of left that subject and went into the exam, but I had one other thought in terms of the pacing for the first part of the episode before they started traveling again, and that is that the pacing of this whole kind of memorial and calm and covery is paced and framed in a way of what Himmel would have wanted or Himmel would have done. Because this whole show, we are seeing a Frieren that is heavily influenced by Himmel, her actions, the care she gives, the love she has for the quirks about herself. And so, of course, we have Frieren praying at the beginning at the armor when Fern comes to join her. And then again, we have them praying again over the armor. We have the fact that Frieren took such care when fighting these soldiers and their armor. I think even the pacing of actually, they're told before they leave, please give time to the villagers. They really want to thank you.
Yeah.
Frieren, from being influenced by Himmel, knows the importance. While this might seem non-consequential or frivolous to her, why do they really care? I'll never see them again. She knows now, because of traveling with Himmel and knowing Himmel, the importance that it would have on the people you've saved to be able to thank you. And that he would have stayed and he would have celebrated with them.
Yeah.
And so that the whole beginning of the episode and the time and the music with it and the immersion and the care that is given both in her actions but also to how they frame it, the score, the pacing, just is all reminds me of Himmel.
Yeah, I agree with that. Getting into the winter stuff, the idea that you can't use magic to carry Stark in these conditions because he'll like blow away is the best thing I've ever heard.
We were literally like, why can't we use magic right now? And it was one of those moments in watching a show where you ask a question and then it's immediately answered by the next piece of dialogue and you're like, whoa, okay.
What does that mean? Okay, like let's break that down. If I'm imagining like taking this pen and making it levitate in the air, right? I'm almost how I'm picturing it, like imagining the weight of this pen and like almost like there are non-existent hands picking it up to make it float. In that same train of thought, if I imagined there being wind in the area and it's blowing towards my right, with those same invisible hands, I could hold on tighter or have like force going the opposite direction. But it's more akin to like anti-gravity within this specific region, and it's following it's like, I don't know, like what's the tension? How do you move forward levitating somebody without like with having enough tension and pull to get them to come along with you, but not enough that wind would fuck it up? Right. Or is that just how strong the winds are? It exceeds that level
because they're so strong. Interesting. Are you with making a magic system, you have to make rules. Cool. There has to be a science to the spells to some degree, and I love that we're bringing up, okay, so why would the wind affect it? It has to have something to do with gravity, the levitation. It makes me think of when we were really interested in the fact that one of the barriers, there was a certain height to it that it stopped. And flying, you like, could you fly over it? Okay, so has to be gravity. I would think it has to be some type of, not weightless. You can't be making it weightless, right? You'd have to make it light as a feather. Maybe that's like the sort of idea.
And like that feather could be manipulated by wind very easily.
Yeah, maybe.
But like in terms of cleaning up debris and stuff that we've seen them do, obviously the conditions have been fine for the most part.
We saw stones, we've moved gravel, we've moved Stark before out of Graf Granite's chambers.
Yeah. It's like, I don't think it has anything to do with like elemental. I wonder if like elemental like things that the earth, like the powers within the earth would somehow be greater or overcome that of magic. But I think that, like...
I love that it's not like you can use it at all times. I like that there is some rules to it. There's a restriction to it. That makes it feel more real and more satisfying, that it's not just, once you know this spell, you're always able to use it, and it's a convenient thing you can always have access to.
You know what it could be, too? It's like the terminology that Frieren used, I think, was like, winds this strong. I wonder, like... Winds aren't necessarily as easy as I described it. Like, oh wow, winds blowing from the left to the right. Tornadoes can happen.
Right.
There could be a lot of like, oh fuck, like a balancing almost in terms of trying to levitate
There's
something.
There's this power that's given to the storm and the snow and the wind on an emotional end too, before we even enter it, that this was the bigger killer than the Demon King.
But exactly. I love that elements in this world are stronger and more deadly, and you can't do... Somebody like Frieren is like, we're fucked. Like, we have to stay in the house for a little bit.
It's like that idea of like, we're just one person on a rock floating in space, but like, that's taking that idea of this elf that lives a really long time versus these humans that are like, Graf Grant used the word, like, I'm like an infant to you, or someone's like an ant to you, and you're an ant in comparison to this planet in the universe.
Yeah.
It gives that idea that, like, a human or even the elf, the living creatures on the planet, are nothing compared to the power of the planet and the elements themselves.
It's awesome because,
that's cool.
Frieren is so, like, powerful. Like, I trust her power so much that if you told me that Frieren, out of everybody in the world, because of all the spells that she knows, was capable of circumventing these horrific conditions, I would have believed you. But the fact
There'd be no natural disasters in a world with mages if that was the case.
The fact that she's like, nah, we gotta stay in here until it gets better is the best thing in the world to me.
She can't just suddenly clear the sky.
I love the show, man. Craft the Monk.
Craft the Monk is the next place to go in terms of talking points.
Thought that elves died out. That's what Craft said, I think. Man, they could take a lot of turns with that character, and we could never see him again. It makes, like, I never want to guess, like, this is definitely gonna happen. If I say it, it's more in the light of, like, oh, that's a theory, and I'm, like, you know, hamming it up to, like, be more fun in the conversation. But in terms of Craft the Monk, one option for sure is leave him be as we got him. I love it. Perfect. Don't touch it. There could also be options that it takes, like, a more nefarious route, or we find out that he's been living this long because of seclusion or because of fear. They could go so many different routes with it, but the way that they used in this episode is perfect to me. I was so, like, convinced for some reason, because of watching other shows, I guess, that it was going to take some, like, oh, this is the next evil guy that we're going to have to deal with turn. And the fact that it didn't, and the way that they were able to utilize this character this episode was fantastic.
He was utilized in order to reintroduce and reinstate the themes of the arc and things we got from Frieren's past, while also reminding us that the arc of being in that city we were in and dealing with the peace envoys and Aura the Guillotine is over.
Yeah.
And we are back to trying to get to heaven. And that reminding us through him of what Frieren's goal is with talking to people in heaven. We get a really amazing line from Craft about everyone who knew of me and my triumphs is dead. And so we're being reintroduced to why we're on this journey in the first place.
Yeah.
The party of heroes, the losing of your original friends in the series and the influence they had on you, and is anyone ever going to remember your name? And then we get that with Aura the Guillotine knowing Frieren the Slayer.
You're so right. I was giggling because I was pulling up a scene, and it's Fern. It's them all like opening the door and seeing Craft squatting, and Frieren's like, pardon, takes a step in, and Fern's like, fuck no, we can't stay here. There's a pervert inside. I love it so much, man.
It's so Fern to think that too.
Okay, talking about Craft, in my mind, instantly jumps to the goddess and the idea of how long the goddess has been around, what the belief entails, and more specifically, praise, right?
Praise.
Like, the goddess will praise me.
I mean, it's shown to us that that's the important concept because we get a flashback of Frieren, and the line that she parts ways basically with Kraft is that she does not need his praise.
Yeah.
So that really is like the core important part of that conversation.
And do you have someone to praise you? In terms of like praise as a theme, it's such an interesting take on it. Like the idea of like a religious group or like people following a god or a goddess is so overdone and usually so formulaic that this is such a happy change up to me. Like it seems like, at least from Kraft and Heider's, like, you know, dialogue, there's so much more emphasis on the meaning behind praising someone and what that does and the chain reaction it causes than the significance of there being a god or goddess, you know? It's like what it brings with it, and it's so interesting.
There's this comic that it makes me think of, this little comic strip. It's on the internet somewhere. I would be surprised if I was the only person that's seen it, where it's a dog that passes away, and when they get to heaven, they're like, was I a good boy? And God's like, you were, or the Grim Reaper's like, you were the best boy. It's like, that's what it makes me think of.
The Grim Reaper was like?
I think it was the Grim Reaper in the comic.
Huh. Does the Grim Reaper bring you to heaven or hell?
I don't really think the Grim Reaper is actually supposed to be connected to like that like more Christian belief. I don't really know where the Grim Reaper came to be. But
if it does, right? Like if a Grim Reaper did exist, would they be the guide to your destination? Because they'd be like the sign of your death is correlated with them
showing up,
and they guide you. They're almost like
they are the guide.
Yeah.
I would say they're the one that comes and gets you and takes you to wherever you are meant to be.
What if, like, you're waiting, right? Like, what if, like, there needs to be time spent before reaching that destination? And
like purgatory?
Yeah, like, is, like, purgatory then the duration of the walk with the Grim Reaper?
I guess in this case it would be.
I'm sorry. But
is there purgatory before getting to heaven in the Frieren universe?
No.
No.
But the idea of praise, right? I want to bring Himmel back into the conversation because I would love to see Heider's and Himmel's backstory in terms of when they first met each other.
The like original party members before they found Frieren met?
Yeah, because like, whereas somebody devotes their life to this kind of thing and they make it a point to praise people, right? And like that lack of forgetting about somebody, right? Himmel comes off as somebody who, as Frieren is able to consistently nerf and hold back and control her mana. It seems like Himmel does that with praise. Like, it seems like he's able to achieve the idea of praising others around him 100% of the time and doesn't need the like verbal confirmation or giving. Like, I would imagine that
he doesn't need it given back to him. Is that what you're saying?
Like, he's always giving it to other people. Whereas other people are making it a point that, okay, I can praise you. Okay, you're praising me. Like, it's like everything that we've gotten from Himmel, like, it's like, oh, he praised every single life around him, you know?
And what the beauty is that he was able to see all the good in others. Like, that's the point of it. Is that he was able to see the effort they put in. When we have that Hater and Frieren conversation, what he says to Frieren is that he can tell the tremendous effort that she put into suppressing her mana, and that is praiseworthy.
Yeah.
even if she doesn't believe in the goddess, the effort that she's put towards something that she obviously cares about for whatever interesting story there is, she has put so much effort into it, and that should be praised. It's like being able to view things that it's like you're looking at someone and you're like, I'm not thinking about subjectively what I care about.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not looking at you and praising what I like about you. I'm looking at you and praising something that's important to you about yourself.
Yep.
Like, if I was someone who, just in terms of, like, looks, if I loved my own eyes and, like, really liked them and someone complimented my eyes, that would make me happier than if they complimented something that they like about me that I don't necessarily, like, care about.
What do you think is the relaying of information to praise? Like, and how important that would be in it? Like, when you're saying, like, do you have someone to praise you for those things? Is praise being expressed in the way that Heiter did to Frieren in acknowledging something that is important to somebody, but they haven't verbally told you about it? Or do you want, like, I'm here to praise you. I'm like an open ear to hear everything that you have done, and I won't forget
like,
that.
How much
and I can respect you for that and respect that thing you've done.
How much is it tied to the idea of everyone you know eventually dying and no one remembering you? It also, how much is it tied to a line we get from Kraft about wanting to be told by the goddess that he did a good job and lived a good life?
Yeah. God.
Frieren has good friends.
Yeah, I doubt this will be the last time we'll meet.
We'll probably never see it, but I doubt it's the last time they will.
Tell me about yourself and I'll tell you about myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's very direct in what we were just talking about, you know? That's so cool.
I like that phrasing. If you were like to sit down and you're meeting someone new, you don't want someone to just talk your ear off about everything about themselves. You want there to be a give and a take. You want someone to be equally as curious about you as you are about them, or not even curious, but equally respectful of the other person being an individual who has their own thoughts, feelings, life, and experience. Who cares?
I have a question for you. If I imagine a conversation with a stranger right now, and it be and saying or somebody says to me, tell me about yourself and I'll tell you about myself. For some reason, my mind immediately goes to, like, small talk. This is what I'm doing with my life. This is like what my career is. This is what I like to do in my free time. But when I read it and see it, and when I heard it from this show, it means so much more. Like, when I read it off the screen, tell me about yourself and I'll tell you about myself, it comes across as, be completely vulnerable and transparent with me and I'll do the same to you.
Instead of shallow weight.
Yeah, exactly. And so why, when I think about it, like, in a real life term, it comes off as much more shallow than what I would prefer in my own life and what I think is remarkable about this show.
I think it's because we're getting it in a conversation where it's tied to being praised about the things that you care about, that someone at the end of the day tells you you did a good job or you put tremendous effort into something. You want to be able to tell someone the things that so, like, if someone was like, tell me about yourself, you're right. Like, I would want to tell them about the things that I'm most excited about myself, or that are really integral to who I am, or the stuff that I maybe need to get off my chest if I want to tell them about myself. That's what I would want to talk about. I'm also the type of personality that is much more ready and available for vulnerable back and forth conversations. Yeah. I am not shy to opening my heart up to someone else in a conversation. I'm not very, like, I don't have a lot of walls up.
Yeah.
So if someone asked me to, like, was like, tell me about yourself and I'll tell you about myself, and what they were going to bring to the table was also vulnerable, I'd be like, yeah. You know
what I think it is? I think it's bringing God up into the situation, and a goddess. I think that, like, I have very interesting and strong opinions on things that deal with religion. That I think go against what the notion that I'm conveying here, which I think is like to show how much I appreciate this. The idea of bringing God or a goddess up into a conversation in the subject of knowing me or knowing you, I think instills the idea into an individual's mind that this is something that only an omnipotent being, somebody who can see the truest version of myself, see what I did when no one else was there, could see.
Right.
And I think being able to bring up, tell me about yourself, I'll tell you about myself, within the same like conversation of the goddess context praising me at the end, opens up the door to that level of transparency.
Gives the weight to that dialogue. I mean, Kraft says, everyone who knew of my triumphs.
Yeah.
So everyone else that knew of all these big things that he's done are dead. Therefore, the goddess is the only person left unless he tells Frieren about those things right now in this tell me about yourself.
Yeah. Which is really cool. I love that. And like even in
the power that you can put to a simple sentence just by the context that you're surrounding it with.
Yeah. Definitely. I think that like it's so easy to be jaded about religion in today's culture because of things being housed or disguised as thus, and then manipulations and wrongdoings like happening within that. But it's such like a interesting look that I don't think is praised or acknowledged enough of like how it can be used in a spiritual sense to be able to connect with somebody else, not over something that might or might not exist, but used as a guise to connect with somebody in a way that you might not unless you are utilizing it that way.
But also we live in a world so much where how often do people really even care about all the like actual deep what's underneath, what's the true you? We're in a social media age. We're in a this is what I'm putting forward into the world. This is what I ate for breakfast. This is where I work.
Yeah.
This is what shows I like to watch. Like, that is what we're showing people and what people are curious about or ask about or seeing when they're scrolling on their phones. Like, the stuff that is so deep to you that only an omnipotent being would know other than you.
Yeah.
And also that idea that Kraft has this line where he says, I needed to believe. He didn't come to believe because he saw evidence of the goddess. He came to believe because he needed it. He needed to feel like someday someone was going to be there knowing all about him. Being like, I know you. We get that once you be coming home, to God, and that he knows you. That's a comforting feeling.
I think it's because like we are in Western civilization, right? We're in the United States, and within my own experience in that, it's around me. What I've seen from other people grown up in a very like religious setting is much more of focus on like titles and like aspects of a story rather than what the story was meant for. Like when it deals with like Eastern philosophies, there's something that resonates with me that I really appreciate of the introspective nature of what this means and what this is for, that I think I hate that wasn't around me, and this is bringing that into light. I love it.
It makes me think of when I was a kid. I used to get really frustrated because people cared more about how often I went to church more than how I actually lived my life and who I was as a person.
Yeah.
And that always frustrated me because I'm like, just because I go into a building doesn't mean anything. I can be like, obviously raised in a religious setting, as you said, like as a child trying to understand why just walking into a building automatically to other people made me seem like a better person was a concept I could not understand. It was more important to me that how I lived my life was something that I viewed as a good person, as just a good person and living life happy, being kind to others. And I was like, isn't that the more internal stuff that's going on more important?
Yeah. I I really like the show.
Mm-hmm.
I have not watched a single episode that has not furthered my appreciation or enjoyment of the show.
And we have here with this episode 11, it's in this difficult point that we talk about sometimes, which is the dismount.
Yeah.
It's where an arc has ended and they're literally showing us, oh, we ended that, we got the closure, now we're walking to the next point.
You've changed clothes.
That's like, you're inherently like, oh, that's going to be the least interesting of the episodes, the least dynamic of the episodes. And so what they had to do with it is give us beautiful score, beautiful pacing, and thoughts to take with us on our journey. Thoughts that are reintroducing ideas and concepts and themes that are already so deeply enrooted in the show with this journey to heaven, and also giving us that so that when we go into the next steps of the journey, we are almost like it's giving us our bags. Like, okay, we're going on with the journey again. We stopped in this one town. Now we're picking our backpacks back up and we're going to head out back to the same journey we were on to begin with.
You know, I thought that meeting another elf might give me more insight into speculation of why the Demon King wanted to kill all elves specifically, but I didn't.
Not touched on at all, which it didn't need to, because all of that is just more our curiosity.
I wondered, like, oh, is it because there's more potential in being a mage specifically? But obviously that wouldn't, like...
Kraft's a monk.
Yeah. And you could make the argument that, oh, regardless of whatever path you choose, because of the longevity of life, you have more potential. But you could also go the way that, like, oh, elves are more inclined to be proficient in magic or, you know, spells. I don't know. It's super interesting, though. I did not think we were going to meet another elf in this circumstance. What a fucking awesome way to show up. Like, that's so unpredictable.
And, like, to give us a monk and to introduce thoughts and feelings and memories of Hater the priest. I like that, like, there is like we're not the same, but we're a device or a vehicle being used to reintroduce or remind Frieren of certain ideas. You
know what else I really like? Like the idea of what is your first thought when you hear adventurers must travel with a first-class mage? Like
that we're about to see some really tough battles.
Why wouldn't it be like, oh, like I'm like, okay, well, that's very specific. Like, that's a very fucking specific rule. Because what if you have an overpowered party, everybody in it who isn't a mage is so fucking well-versed in what they're doing that they wouldn't need it for a fight? And you know what fucking potentially answers that question? The fact that we walk in on Kraft squatting to keep warm so he doesn't die. Even though he's an elf and has lived this long, he didn't have fire.
And he thanks her for warming him up.
Like the idea that like
the simple things
that like a mage is able to bring like out like different survival techniques to the front, and
like when the party of heroes finds Frieren and they're like, oh, we needed a mage, she'll do, even though she only has like 30% of Hater's like mana. It's just that they needed a mage for whatever a mage can bring to the table.
It's like it gives importance to the formula that there needs to be one of each class. You know, like there's reason for it here.
I really want to get your take on a line. I don't know if you had anything else. The idea of Frieren being like, I've already had someone praise me. So she isn't going to... That, like, surprised me. When that line came out where he was like, you tell me about yourself, I'll tell you about myself. And her response is that she doesn't need to do it again, but she's smiling. Like, I've already had someone praise me.
Yeah.
I'll pass. What was your take on that? Like, some could read that as cold. Like, her being like, I don't need any new friends. But, like...
Well, it's... what I don't take it as that because of, I guess, the role of Kraft. It almost reminds me of Confession. Like, like, it's... Because of, like, him being in the career, I don't know, like, the life choice that he is, it's inherently good-willed of him to ask that, you know?
See, I didn't take it as cold either. I took it as she's not the type of personality who wants to go run around screaming to everyone why she should be praised.
Yeah.
It's something that's intimate and vulnerable and special and to be done with someone that she mutually cares about.
Yeah.
And that she had someone praise her that she so much cares for and that so much cared for her, then why does she need someone else to do it?
Yeah.
Like, she's more, it's a modest take. It's not like, I need everyone to praise me.
Yeah.
I need everyone to love me. She doesn't need everyone to love her. She is, like, shocked that the people that love her even loved her. She's like, they complimented me on my quirky spell hobby. Like, they saw things in me that I didn't notice about myself. Like...
Forgive me, because throughout the first 4 episodes when we were watching it, it was very difficult for me to write down everything. I don't know if we knew before this that Heiter was an orphan.
I don't think we did.
But looking back about, like, war orphan of the southern region, and the fact that, like, the idea of her family picture saved her life, and knowing that Fern was an orphan, it's just like, God, I love it so much. There isn't a second wasted.
Mm-hmm. I like, I think, to that same thought, in that same past flashback that we got, Himmel and Eisen are the ones playing with the kids, while the two who were kind of accidental parents are the ones sitting off to the side. Like, when Heiter met Fern, he was at a low place, and finding her and happening upon her, he decided to dedicate himself to being the better version of himself for the sake of this child and for everyone who loved him.
Yeah.
And I just really like, because we see that, because then Frieren, who was sitting aside, doesn't realize that until after Himmel is gone.
Yeah.
And so the two that we see sitting aside having this conversation are the two that didn't realize some things about themselves until Himmel's death, basically, or until they happened upon someone who made them realize to care about themselves and how much they cared about others.
I want to take a step back. Last thing I have to say, to bring up another point of the question that you had posed to me about Frieren's, like, rejecting of talking about herself and sharing that information back and forth. It's almost like it gives positive light to the person that you were once able to share with. Like, the idea of that moment being preserved and encapsulated in a shroud of, like, respect that, like, this isn't something that can be easily replaced. Like, if I really had a connection with one person and they passed on, I might have a connection with another person someday, but that does not at all step on what that was for me in its own light. And I really like that. And in this story, we also have that idea of, like, with death, who's going to remember you, immortalizing in statues. But also, I believe it was either a line of someone speaking to Fern or about Fern. It might have been Hater, it might have been Frieren, about you being I think it was Hater to Fern when he first met her, about she's the one that keeps her parents alive. Yeah. Yep. By continuing to live. And so by Frieren wanting to hold on to that memory of having that interaction and being praised by Hater, that's her keeping him alive. Like, I don't need someone else, because that's something I hold on to, is like, he lived and he did this for me and he was important to me. Yeah. God. Beautiful. I cannot wait to learn more spells. Yep. Get some more grimoires. Hear about more spells that have been learned. I want like just a little couple minute funny bit of doing something really hard, doing some quest by one of these cities that is so challenging just for a silly little spell that no one understands why Frieren wants. I just want another little interaction like that, because it was great when we met Stark that we wanted to get into that nest with the dragon for the silly little spell about seeing through clothing. Yeah. Do you think that a spell exists? I was trying to think of something, like, reasonable enough that I think that it has a good chance of. Like a dye in this world. Like, if you wanted to change the color of the clothing that you had.
I could see something more practical like that existing in how the magic has been introduced to us and what other types of spells we've learned. I could see that being a type of spell that would be in this universe.
Okay, in the idea of a spell to see through clothing, does that spell apply to the person who's seeing's eyes or the clothes of everybody else? And if it's referring to that individual's eyes and being able to, does that mean that a spell could exist for, like, night vision? So instead of, like, using fire to illuminate a place, you could, like...
Or change the color of your eyes.
You know? Like, God. Okay, alright, that's all I have you.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and we hope to see you next time.